Blue eyes, blonde hair, muscular, kind, stereotypical? Maybe, but I couldn't care less. This is the boy of my dreams, and he hangs out with me every day. Did you get that biology project done? Jackson asks. No. You? Nope. I look up at him. He's about an entire head taller than me, and just looking into his caring eyes makes my stomach do flips. We lock eye contact for a second before he brushes his hair out of his face and clears his throat. Maybe we could get together to work on it soon. I smile. Yeah, that would be terrific. The bell rings, bringing me back to the present. Other students in the halls come back into my peripheral vision. I didn't even notice I tuned them out. Jackson flashes me a quick grin, and we walk into the classroom. After only a couple of giggles at Jackson's remarks and multiple scowls from our teacher, the class is out for the day. I wave goodbye to Jackson, reluctantly, of course, before getting in the car with my friend Melissa. I watch Jackson walk away with his friend Braylon, who Melissa is currently dating. Melissa smiles at me when I open the car door. Hey girl, how was your last class? She opens a handheld mirror to check her lip gloss. She's gorgeous as always, tan skin, blonde hair, and icy blue eyes. Good. I bet it was even better since Jackson was there, she says with a sly smile. I roll my eyes at her. You know what I've told you. He doesn't want a relationship or anything. It's too early. But he hasn't told you that, she says. At the end of last school year, Jackson lost his brother in a vehicle accident. I started talking to him a little at the end of last year, which was my freshman year. During the summer, I reached out to him. I just said that I was thinking of him. He didn't respond for a couple of days, but when he did, he asked if we could hang out sometime. Eventually, we decided to hang out at my house with a couple of my friends and his friends. I remember the dullness in his eyes, but how they seemed to get brighter every day. That's selfish. I'm not like that, I say. Oh, come on. He's totally into you. But that's where I think she's wrong. The thing is, blondes like blondes. And in brunette, hot. Blonde guys don't like brunettes. Brunettes aren't hot. I don't answer her, and she drops the subject. Silence starts to stretch between us until Melissa clears her throat. I was thinking, she smiles. There's a rodeo this weekend. Saturday at 4 o'clock. I got some tickets. I perk up. We live in Northern California. Rodeos aren't uncommon. My favorite part is the dance floor before the actual bull riding starts. Everyone dances to country music on wooden floors under sparkling porch lights. It's a feeling like no other, one where everyone unites with laughter and dance. Would you like to come? Melissa says. Totally. Thank you. I say. You're welcome. Is there anybody else going? I ask. Melissa sneaks a glance at me and holds back a laugh. I raise my eyebrows. What? So, I got 4 tickets. One for me, you, and Braylon. She starts. I cover my face with my hands as heat rises to my cheeks. This time, Melissa doesn't bother with holding her laugh. I smile slightly underneath my hands. I was thinking you could invite Jackson. She squeals. I look at her with a slight frown. I don't know if he would like that. I finally reply. Huh. Yeah, right. If he's with you, he'll want to go, she says. But, I don't know, Melissa. I burst, exasperated. He's a great friend, but I really don't want to put him on the spot. There's a lot going on in his life. He doesn't need a girl to worry about. Melissa rolls her eyes. I look out the window to see my little yellow house and white porch standing there. How long we've been sitting in my driveway, I don't know. I open the car door and sling my backpack over my shoulder. I'm sorry you think that, Melissa shrugs. Thank you for inviting me, Melissa. I really mean it. She smiles. Of course, Alex. Just think about it, okay? She says. After a minute, I finally respond. Fine. Melissa squeals, and I shut the door with a playful roll of my eyes. As I turn to walk up the steps of my porch, I take one last look behind me. Melissa is on the phone with someone talking excitedly. I give her a small wave, and she beams at me and waves back. As I walk up the steps and open the door, I think and rethink the text I'm about to send. Are you busy this weekend? Is what I eventually decide to send to Jackson. I lay on my bed with my phone on my chest, waiting for it to buzz. My room is on the 2nd floor, The walls painted baby blue, decorated with posters of my favorite bands. I rub my hand over the quilt laying on the bed, made by my mom, comforting my nerves. I practically fall out of bed when my phone finally vibrates. Something by the Beatles plays from my speaker in my room, while my fingers fumble to open my phone. Jackson. No. Why? Me. There's a rodeo this weekend. Would you want to go? Melissa and Braylon are going too. After a minute of waiting, the bubble, showing the other person is typing, appears on the screen. My stomach erupts in butterflies. Jackson. That sounds fun. What time? I can't help but squeal in delight. Me. The gates open at 4 p.m. Jackson. Would you like me to pick you up? Once again, butterflies take over in my stomach. I smile uncontrollably. Me. That would be great. Thank you, smiley face. Jackson. Of course. Can I pick you up at 3:30? Me. Sounds good. Jackson. Okay. Smiley face. I turn off my phone and sigh. Is this romantic or not? I honestly have no idea. Saturday comes fast. I contemplate my outfit many times in the morning. Eventually, I decide on a white dress about knee length, with a scoop neck and slight ruffles. I also wear my favorite cowboy hat and boots, the same color with flowers and vines stitched on them. I also curl my hair, which is my favorite way to do my hair. Finally, I wear silver and turquoise stone jewelry. I wait on my bed, holding my phone in a death grip, waiting for Jackson to arrive. Soon enough, I hear the gravel moving and get a text from Jackson. Jackson. I'm here when you're ready, smiley face. It takes all of my will not to sprint down the stairs and across the porch to get to Jackson's car. I walk quickly, though. I open the door to Jackson's Toyota Prius, and he smiles, then freezes. Jackson? I ask, nervously. He blinks and looks me up and down. You look. The tension rises, and blood rushes to my cheeks. I quickly look down in embarrassment. Get in. Sorry, he finally says. I get in the car, and we drive away. The car ride was full of laughs and jokes, and what seems too soon, we arrive at the venue. The place is already bustling. The smell of hay and manure fills the air. As the sun starts to sink behind the mountains, they turn on the lights. After we get out of the car, I beam at Jackson, not being able to hide my excitement. Hey, Alexandra. I hear someone shout my name from across the parking lot, and I turn around to see Melissa running toward me. She wears a gray V-neck top and a denim skirt. Come on, Braylon. She shouts behind her. Braylon rolls his eyes with a laugh and continues to walk. He wears a gray t-shirt, matching Melissa, and jeans, boots, and of course, a cowboy hat. I glance at Jackson, now that he is standing. All I can think is, God, he looks good. He wears a white button-up, with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, exposing his forearms. With the shirt, he wears dark jeans, boots, and a cowboy hat that match mine. If you didn't know, you'd think we had coordinated our outfits as well. Luckily, Melissa barrels into me to hide my blushing cheeks. We're going to have so much fun, she says as she jumps up and down in excitement. Totally. After we watch multiple men get bucked off of bulls, there is an intermission. We decide to go down to the dance floor to, well, dance. The lights are strung across the wooden floors from poles, and the familiar sound of country music fills the air as people laugh and sing along. Melissa and I dance together holding hands and singing, really shouting, the words to Boot Scootin' Boogie, all while the boys smile and sway dance like men do. Suddenly, the DJ cuts the music. This song goes out to all the lovely couples out there. My stomach erupts in butterflies as I frantically glance at Melissa. Braylon has already scooped her up, but she looks at me and wiggles her eyebrows. I turn around, and my eyes go wide. Jackson, in all of his glory, holds out his hand to me. May I have this dance? He asks with a grin. Is it cliché? Definitely. Do I care? Nope. Yes. Is all I manage to squeak out before Jackson places a hand at the small of my back and grabs my hand. I put my other hand between his shoulder blades, scooting closer to him. He smiles and laughs. There is no tension. There is no nervousness. And nothing has ever felt this right. You know, he looks down at me and I smile up at him. I've been waiting for this way too long. Just that one sentence makes me blush so hard, but I don't bother to hide it. In fact, it makes me smile even more. The lights twinkle as It's Your Love by Tim McGraw plays, and this time he scoots closer. Even though it's just one dance, I think that everything has changed between us. Next story to the broke, unmotivated and hopeless college kid with no job. Something like cooking your own meal can be trivial. On a good week, you get anywhere between 30 and 50 bucks that you'd need to stretch for the whole month. You could spend that on chicken, fresh veggies, and pasta. Of course, Taco Bell is right down the street and a box of ramen is $1.50, which means you can buy a few cases of beer on the weekends if you need to. This was my life at Kent State University in gloomy Kent, Ohio, and aside from studying journalism and writing sketch comedy, I had no real-life skills. I had bad finances, no plan for when I graduated, and I could have stood to lose a few pounds, still could. Not to mention all of this was at a time when journalism began really racing toward the bottom of the hill as an industry. Quite simply, I was unmotivated to do really anything other than make people laugh and drink. However, nothing does more to motivate a college kid that sleeps on a bed with no box spring than trying to impress a girl. It makes sense. Since the invention of fire, men have been trying to figure out how to do this. In fact, I'm convinced those paintings on the cave walls in France were the earliest recorded step-by-step guide for men on how to attract them. It was now my turn to try to figure this out with a girl I met while on a student film set. My problem is that when you have no money or job, there's not much you can do but go to the aforementioned Taco Bell and drink, which in my case, is slang for bumming box wine off of your roommate. Fancy restaurants with expensive meals were out of the question. Hell, even going to the local movie theater was iffy. $5 for a medium bag of popcorn? Something about this girl made my heart flutter and skip a beat every time we talked. When I heard her laugh, my knees buckled and I became an addict looking for my next hit of dopamine. No way was I going to let my financial shortcomings stop me from seeing where a date with this girl could take me. So, in an attempt to better myself ever so slightly, I decided it was time to learn how to cook. It wasn't a total long shot. I already knew how to make eggs. How hard could the rest be? A little oil in the pan, a protein, and some salt and pepper, and bada bing bada boom. I'm a poor man's Emeril Lagasse. Piece of cake. Absolutely no problemo at all. My roommate, a proud American with Italian roots and too many jobs and side jobs to count, helped me settle on making chicken parmesan. To us, it was the cheapest, most upscale dish a desperate guy could make while pinching pennies. All it really is chicken, egg, breading, sauce, and pasta with cheese. He would even help me gather the ingredients. Additionally, an Aldi recently opened up in Kent, which is a godsend if you're on an extreme budget. I will say this though, if you plan to go shopping, make a list and stick to it. We walked in looking for 6 items and left with 20 other things we didn't actually need, including 2 pallets of yogurt, 3 cartons of kiwi juice, 2 bags of chips, and, for some reason, a jar of olives. We were so excited about all the extra things we could afford. We forgot to double-check if I had everything I needed for the date. Oh well, I got the main stuff. I hummed to myself. We can cross that bridge if we get there, and worry about missing things later. The plan for the night was to have her over by 6:30 p.m. to eat. From there, we'd go to a musical being put on by the school's theater department. Pro tip: students get into these events for free. It was Into the Woods, which was recently adapted into a movie featuring Meryl Streep, Chris Pine, Anna Kendrick, and more. It was a frugal, foolproof plan that made me seem more cultured than I actually was. There were absolutely no flaws that we could think of. Except I didn't know how to cook, let alone correctly time how long it took to cook a dish you were going in blind to do. For example, if one were to make this right, it would probably take you between 45 minutes to an hour and 30 minutes to do. I decided I would make mine in 30, which if done correctly, would have been a land speed record or something. Another premium example of this would be the fact that you must first tenderize the chicken breast before cooking it. Seems easy enough until you factor in that to complete this task, a meat tenderizer would be the optimal tool. I realized this right about when my date knocked on my door. We greeted each other and I showed her around the crummy, 5th-floor corner apartment that was sold to us as premium. To her credit, She was a good sport about pretending to be impressed when I showed her the carpets that stretched all the way from the front door into the bedrooms in the back and the balcony that just barely had concrete missing from its platform. She even pretended to admire the old bougie furniture my roommate got from his dad, who recently moved out of state. She did not, however, see my room. The undecorated mattress directly on the floor, clothes in clear plastic bins with a broken black futon in the middle of the room would be saved for a different night if I was lucky. Dinner will be ready soon, I lied, ducking into the back of the galley-style kitchen with barely any counter space. It did, however, have really nice tiles, so there's that. Most of the ingredients for the dish needed to be stored on a folding card table we used as the eating area of the apartment. In one corner of the room were empty pop and beer boxes that we needed to break down before throwing away, and in the opposite corner was a trash can we thrifted. In my very minimalist, slang for shitty, cooking toolkit was a sheet pan, a frying pan, a pot for the spaghetti, and a metal spatula. I had settled on using a half-empty tequila bottle to beat the chicken breasts into a manageable size for breading and frying. I rolled up my sleeves, took a deep breath, prayed this would go well, and dove in. Thwack, thwack, thwack. Luckily, my date couldn't hear any of this because my roommate, in his infinite wisdom, decided to set the mood and play opera music as loud as he could form his bedroom. Imagine tenderizing chicken with a bottle of alcohol to the hum of Andrea Bocelli belting out big ones to an audience. Romantic. 10 minutes and 2 heartbreaking odes about the loss of a loved one later, the meat was breaded and into the frying pan. The trick to using an old hand-me-down frying pan is to never use one. However, if you have to, patience and a silicone or plastic spatula are key to still making food. Of course, if you have neither patience or the right spatula, then a shit ton of oil and high heat will have to do, according to my panicked brain. In a searing hot pan, breaded chicken sounds like a waterfall or wind rushing through trees during a hurricane. Of course, this means that oil is prone to jump out of the pan and splatter everywhere on the stove, which in this case it did. The worst thing to do is realize how big of a slob you are mid-date. Worry it could be a deal breaker, and try to right the ship immediately. It's good to realize the error of your ways, but bad timing is such a bitch. Not thinking about this, once the chicken was in the sheet pan and smothered in sauce, topped with cheese of course, I threw it in the preheated oven and got to work cleaning. With the hot frying pan still on the stove and a pot of boiling water cooking the noodles, I began breaking empty boxes down and sweeping up the dining area. "How was your day?" I asked, poking my head around the corner. "It was good." "Hey, why is your roommate playing opera music?" Her question was left unanswered because as soon as I felt I did a good job sweeping the area, I was already attempting to clean up the excess oil and grease stains on the stove. An important note to make is that I attempted this with a paper towel. Remember what I said about patience? That also applies to cleaning a stove you were still using and making sure you don't touch any burners that still might be in use or pans that were still wildly hot. As soon as the paper accidentally touched the still searing hot pan, it erupted in flames. Shocked and afraid of the potential burns, I dropped the fireball onto the still greasy, oily stove and watched as an inferno burst in front of me. "Oh geez, oh geez, oh geez," I whispered to myself as I looked around the bone-stock kitchen for what I could do to stop this. All I had in reach were paper towels, a tequila bottle previously used as a tenderizer, the shirt on my back, and a jar of olives we forgot to put in the fridge. The fire grew as I rifled through the kitchen for anything that could put it out. "How's it going in there?" "It smells great," my date said from the adjacent room. "Almost ready," I proclaimed, trying to hide my panic. It was not almost ready. The whole damn apartment was almost on the verge of burning down. At this point, I could have done one of two options. I could give up, call the fire department, and admit to myself that it was a sham to try and reach any higher than I could to do something great. Or I could keep fighting. After all, isn't love worth fighting for? First, I removed the pan and pot from the fire and threw both into the sink. I knew water could spread a grease fire, so instead of dousing it, I grabbed the nearest container filled with white stuff and tossed it on the flames to smother them. Want to know what happens to fine sugar when it's thrown on a grease fire? It's the opposite of putting it out. I barely had time to avoid the mini explosion before an eyebrow burned off. It was so intense that the fire somehow spread into the oven, the flames light flickering through the glass door. Incidentally, this was also the moment I realized we forgot to grab salt from Aldi, and we could neither smother the flame or season the chicken when it came out of the oven. Desperate, I took my shirt off and began beating the hell out of the fire with it. The harder I swung, the more apparent it became I was no longer cooking to the outside world. Not even Bocelli could drown out the 12-round boxing match coming from the kitchen. When my date came to see what was happening, all the color left her face and she could do nothing but watch as a hairy, overweight and shirtless man attacked a grease fire with a now half-burned shirt. "Oh my God," she uttered. "Dinner is almost there," I said between each swing. She was soon joined by my roommate, who surveyed the situation and eventually also started beating the fire with the shirt on his back. We looked like barbarians, grunting and hacking away at something we could not understand but knew it was the enemy. Soon, we were no longer swinging to put out, but swinging for blood. At least that's what it felt like at the time. When it became clear that the fire was barely showing any signs of completely dying, I had assumed the date was over, that the girl I was so taken by had run out of the apartment screaming into her Uber app, pleading for anyone to pick her up. Perhaps it was time to accept that I would always be an unmotivated, directionless chump working a desk job he did not like for money he could not keep because of bills he could not afford. This is what I get for hoping, for wanting to do something new, I thought to myself. Baking soda, my date yelled from behind us. Ugh. I grunted, still in my barbaric form. As the flames began to grow, my date began searching the cabinets for baking soda, which as it turns out also can be used to smother a grease fire. Within seconds, she found what looked to be an old box of baking soda left behind from the apartment's previous owners. Another second and the fire was out. All that was left was the smell of smoke and burnt food. We stood there, in the kitchen, two shirtless men panting like they just ran the New York Marathon and a woman who probably should have left already. But she didn't, and I still had a meal to finish making. A little fire like this wouldn't ruin the night. Probably, maybe, okay. So, like blind confidence, even if it's important for your growth, isn't such a great thing to have sometimes. I should have just let the chicken stay buried in the oven until I could be by myself. It was not pretty. Half of it was completely destroyed, turned into coal from the heat of the fire creeping into the oven. The other half was blackened, but looked like it could have had some life still left in it. Slightly charred, but it doesn't look horrible, I said. My roommate laughed at the notion, retreated back into his room, and turned the music off. His optimism for me dashed. My optimism for the meal went away as soon as I remembered the noodles spilled into the sink, dying a watery death. The meal was officially ruined. Abe, we should just grab food on the way to the musical, my date said. We're running late anyway. Oh, okay, I said. We didn't talk the entire way to Taco Bell. It was torture. While I drove, I couldn't help but imagine the internal dialogue going on in her head. Something about how an idiot like me was ever allowed to have a driver's license in the first place. Maybe she was considering her options and planning her escape during the musical. Perhaps pulling the fire alarm or sneaking out during the interlude. The food never tasted so salty and depressing in my entire life. To make matters worse, she kept making jokes about what happened, probably as an olive branch. The attempt was nice, so I tried to internalize my embarrassment so as to not dampen the mood too much. We were still in this together after all. After the show, I dropped her off at her apartment and went home. By then, the adrenaline rush of what happened had worn off, and we were at least able to talk about the musical. There were even some laughs. Still, I couldn't help but feel like I blew my shot. Back home, I let out the longest sigh of my life while sinking to the floor. It must have sounded like I was dying in slow motion to my neighbors across the hall. After a while, I decided it was time to see the damage and figure out how screwed I was when it came to my security deposit. Luckily, the damage to the kitchen only looked cosmetic and could be cleaned off with some Pine Sol, a wash rag, and effort. My pride? That was a different discussion. When I finished cleaning, I sat at the card table and looked at the charred chicken, letting the dismay warp me. What was I thinking, trying to cook something I had never attempted before? What did you think was going to happen? You just pick it up like a deck of cards and play go fish? Dejected. I figured it couldn't hurt at least trying the chicken that hadn't completely died in the oven. If I was going to die single, I was going to do it with a full belly. I ripped off a piece of it and plopped it in my mouth. Surprisingly, it didn't suck. Actually, it tasted good. Great even. Bite after bite of this chicken, I began to get the crazy idea that maybe it wasn't such a terrible thing to have motivation, or at the very least some inspiration to be better than you were. Even if I didn't get the girl, I could keep learning how to cook and chase this feeling. Then, I got a text from my date. Hey, I had a great time tonight, even though you almost killed us. Maybe you can try cooking for me again some other time? 8 years later, I'm still with her, still cooking. This time though, the kitchen I work in is fully stocked and it's cleaned ritualistically. It's not spotless, but you'd be hard-pressed to find any caked on grease, fat, or oil on the stove. And yes, I keep it stocked with plenty of salt and baking soda, just in case. Next story. London is the city that became a world of its own. So many people immigrate to London that one would imagine the rest of the United Kingdom does not matter for foreigners. Economy as well, education as well, the health system could be better, but still London is a city where many want to work in. Such was the dream of a man in his 30s, an age when adults do not dream anymore but work in order to sustain themselves. But not him. He worked so much that he ended up looking at the world with too many expectations. 10 minutes and we'll open the doors. Came a voice from the front. That announcement came as bad news for the workers in the back, whose job was to make sure the books were placed on shelves and ready to be broken by thousands of hands. Do women really like to read this? One of the workers asked, swaying one sample at his co-worker. My girlfriend likes it. She told me I should take some notes. The first one scrunched his nose in disgust as he placed it back on the shelf. The cover itself was enough of a hint at what the story was about. Maybe you should read it too, Tom. When was the last time you went on a date? The second worker asked his mate, a teasing smile widening on his face. Tom shook his head vehemently, his ideas of a good book being far from what was before him. I used to work in the publishing business. This is one of the reasons I gave it up. I thought you were fired because you weren't doing your job right, commented the second worker, keeping his eyes on the books. Tom narrowed his eyes at him and puckered his lips, feeling his pride shatter. Let's not talk about that. Mate, you've been abandoned by your parents, and now you live in the apartment above this store. I do believe we need to talk about your future. Ruddy, no matter how much I like when you stop talking about yourself, let's not concentrate on me. I'm doing fine, Tom said, turning around and walking in the staff room. Why don't you call your father and ask him for a loan? Ruddy asked, following his friend through the door. No, I'm not having this discussion again, Tom exclaimed, searching for something else to do. It didn't seem like Ruddy was one to give up. You should leave aside your petty fights and ask him when it's hard for you. You sound just like Nina, Tom said, passing by Ruddy on the way back into the library. Well, maybe she was right. You shouldn't have broken up. She knew what you needed. Yep, that was the problem, Tom mumbled as he walked out. It seemed the 10 minutes ended because a crowd of women made their way inside, some more calmly than others, and went straight to the new book. It was just past the craziness of erotic novels and their fans when Toma was ready to take his well-deserved break. He was talking to someone when he was surprised by another one of his colleagues. Tom, this very well-dressed gentleman wants to talk to you, she said, eyeing him. Toma only needed to take a glimpse of his shoes, and he knew who that was. He sighed but walked to the gray-haired man without much ado. Is my father disinheriting me, Aldo? He asked, feeling like he will lose his precious break on something insignificant. As a matter of fact, sir, I am here about an inheritance. Your grandfather's. Tom raised an eyebrow, still very suspicious. Shouldn't you be talking to father then? No, sir. You and you only are the benefactor, said Aldo, the lawyer of the Bennington family, and retired from what Tom knew. What is this about then? Tom asked, growing curious. He couldn't lie. He was anticipating some money since he was in desperate need. Should we arrange a meeting to discuss this issue? Perhaps tomorrow morning? Aldo answered in his posh accent. Tom raised an eyebrow, but with how much attention this old man seemed to draw, It was better to go along with whatever he planned. Sure, your office, if you still have it. Just because I retired does not mean I do not still own the law firm, he added before he gave Tom one of his quick bows of head and left. What the heck was that? Ruddy asked as he approached his colleague from the back. Are you in trouble? I'm not sure yet. As soon as next morning came around, Tom woke up and groggily made his way into the bathroom. Looking at his reflection, he couldn't help but notice how much weight he actually lost in the last 6 months. It's been hard making a living by himself, but it was far better than having someone breathe down his neck. He didn't try dressing up. He actually chose to wear clothes that he knew would never be up to his father's standards. His father, the big conglomerate, the man with the money, albeit not made by his own handiwork, but by others he paid. Getting the cab was the best choice to get there in time, so maybe that was why Tom took the subway. There was also the problem of not having any money, but one more reason to be seen as a disappointment could not be avoided. If he chose that way, he may as well go all the way. So when he arrived at the prestigious law firm, as soon as he stepped inside, he was met with incredulous looks. There he was, dressed in black pants with a nerdy shirt and a khaki jacket barely covering the front, which was a picture of an anime character. His hair was a mess, and he looked like he hadn't slept in months. Anyway, once he arrived at the information stand, he smiled. I'm here to see old Aldo, he said with no filter whatsoever. And your name is? The well-dressed, superior-looking employee asked from behind his neat desk. Bennington. The secretary looked up at him in a way that almost questioned if he was or not who he implied. After a sigh and a few types on his laptop, the secretary nodded and let Tom walk to the elevator. While inside, he couldn't help but tap his foot. He was curious what inheritance he missed on and how come his father never claimed it. All these questions were killing him. Toma, I'm glad you came. Please, take a seat, Aldo said as soon as the messy man entered. I'm sure you're wondering just what is happening. I'm curious why my father isn't here to claim it. Your father does not know about this inheritance, Aldo answered, surprising the younger man. As I told you before, you are the sole inheritor of this particular house. It's a house. A furnished house, and of course a sum of money attributed to it, for its care, I suppose, Aldo said before he pushed the document towards Tom. The young man read it carefully, and with every paragraph his eyes shifted over to the lawyer. This is a lot for just a simple care of a house, Thomas said, suspicious of the lawyer. Why does my father not know about this? This will has been left by your grandfather to my father, especially for this day. It marks 80 years since he died. He wanted you to receive it once your grandmother passed. But why me? Because you need it. The will says it too. It needs to go to the person that hit the lowest point of his life. If there is too much greed, then the house shall not be used but sold. This house is very important, Toma. If you accept it, you have to move there. There where? Aberdeen. Scotland? It's in Scotland? You decide, Tom. It is a good opportunity, but it's also a big responsibility. It took a few minutes for Toma to make up his mind. Only looking at the huge amount of money allocated to the house was overwhelming. He really needed money, and it seemed like he could use this rare chance in order to pull himself out of the artistic pit he was in. I understand. A content smile formed on Aldo's face. Good luck, son. Tom left that day feeling like a huge rock has been shoved off his back. The pressure of having the responsibility of a whole mansion was nothing compared to surviving a mediocre life while living in the apartment above his workplace. He still had many questions, some to which he knew nobody could answer but his grandparents, and they were gone. Charles Bennington was an honorary personality in the Bennington house, and not even his son dared stain his image. But Toma couldn't recall a time when his father ever told him about his grandfather. As Tom passed the entrance and walked into the streets of London, he couldn't help but be expectant. Money and a house were enough to plant a smile on his face, and he couldn't wait to see what was waiting for him in Aberdeen. Thoughts of buoy life in his new house filled his mind for the whole way home. Once he unlocked his front door and entered the shabby little place that he resided in for a year, he started to wonder, was it all right? Was it really so easy? The old man wouldn't play him for a fool after so long. He was too strict for that. With sloppy movements as if he had gone through many hardships in his life, the tall and lanky man strolled through his apartment with a look of melancholy. He had to say goodbye to his stacked corners, not by magazines or clothing, but by little figurines of different superheroes. Most of his pocket money went into manga, which he had set up nicely in order in the servant that seemed to fall apart under his eyes. There were only 2 shelves and the base bottom, but they were probably the cleanest because Tom was wiping the dust more often than his mother did for her trinkets. His eyes then turned to the smart TV he had won at his own shop raffle. Or maybe they let him win since they knew he did not have one. The bed was full of memories, and not dirty ones but quite childish. He had more friends come over in that small square space than he had in his younger days back at his parents' house. Probably that was the main reason he loved it so much. It was so different from what he had been offered before, and he was paying the price of being independent. And now I have to move, he sighed and plopped on his Avengers pillow. When he bought at a retail after having to hackle for it for 15 minutes. He didn't know when he stopped gathering his belongings, but sometime while cleaning up he fell asleep. The loud phone alarm woke him up before his shift, and he wiped his drool off before he got up and tamed his hair with his hand and saliva. He only checked his appearance on the way before he walked in the bookstore looking like he had been in the middle of a playground the whole morning. His supervisor was a woman who liked to prepare herself to the smallest detail, so when someone so messy passed her on the way to the back room, she flinched. "Don't dare come out of there, Tom. Not like this," she said with a tinge of disgust as she pointed at his attire. His friend was already there, placing the magnetic stickers on the back of the books so they won't get stolen. He waved at Tom and patted the seat next to him before handing the messy man his share of work. "So?" he asked, knowing something happened. "I may have to take a leave of absence." He started making the other laugh loudly. "Yeah, right, as if Florence would ever agree with that. You live upstairs because she vouched for you, and in exchange you have to work your arse off in this place." "It's all right. I'm moving," he said with such nonchalance. His friend, Ruddy, was the man that had followed him through thick and thin ever since Tom decided to be an editor, the same one that sheltered him after Tom's fall with his parents and his girlfriend. He had seen his friend go through terrible times, fall so hard that it hurt even him. That same friend who had seen it all was now left speechless. "Excuse me?" was the only line he could muster. "I inherited a mansion in Aberdeen, and I have to move and live in it in order to get some pocket money too." "Who left you a mansion? Isn't your father against you inheriting anything related to the family?" "It's from Granddad. I don't know much either, but I agreed with the conditions. If it doesn't work out then, too bad. I'll come back and take it from the bottom." He was speaking about his own life with so much ease and with such an optimistic tone that it baffled Ruddy. "Mate, if you leave you won't have anything to return to. Lewis won't let you back in the apartment, and you will have to beg on your knees to allow you to work here. He is very strict, you know that." Tom shrugged, seemingly fine with that idea, but his heart felt heavy. Reality was harsher when spoken out loud by another beggar such as his friend. Since he had nothing to lose anyway, Tom packed only his clothes and took the train to Aberdeen early the next day. Standing in silence and watching the passing scenery, he couldn't help but feel like he was going from busy and sweaty London to the more picturesque countryside. He was a bit worried. He wasn't going to just live someplace else, but also have to care for a house and everything connected to it. But it didn't dishearten him, not after he checked his bank account and saw how many zeros were added to his few pounds. For 7 hours and a half, Tom made several scenarios in his mind. If he were to find someone already there, cleaning or whatever else, he had to introduce himself as the new owner. That sounded quite nice to his ears, the owner. If people in Aberdeen were to approach him about the house or for any other reason such as welcoming him in the neighborhood, he needed to come up with a more decent background than he had. He couldn't arrive there and say, "Oh, yes, I was abandoned by my father when I decided to do whatever I want with my life, and now I am an unemployed, single man in his 30s. But thank you for popping by." He scrunched his nose in dislike. He could say that he worked at a famous publishing company, and now he's on a break in order to finish his book. Yeah, that sounded a lot better. It made him look more like an intellectual and mysterious figure. There were so many ideas and very creative ways in which he could introduce himself to these unknown people that when he actually arrived on the front porch of the house, he was a bit disappointed. Nobody was there, and it looked like nobody wanted to be there. It wasn't even placed in a lively part of the city, but just outside with the next house about 20 minutes away. The whole house seemed to be taken out of a history book, at least on the outside. The key to the house looked as intriguing and elegant as the front door. Once inside, the smell of old wood and dust made him sneeze and cough. When he calmed down, he realized that everything was vintage, expensive, and yet tasteful. Looking through the living room and kitchen, he realized that he needed to bring a little of the 21st century in it, especially to the water pipes, sockets, which did not exist, and much more. He went up to the first floor, and the only one, on a staircase that didn't inspire much confidence. Upstairs it was even more dusty, and the 3 rooms and 2 bathrooms could not be used. Tom sighed, a little worried about the level of work the house needed. He returned to the ground floor and went to the living room. He wanted to sit on the couch, but decided not to. From the corner of his eye, he saw that there was another round staircase that most likely went into the cellar. With small steps, because he was afraid of falling down, he descended at most 2 meters in a kind of hall. The first thing that caught his eye was a portiere, a curtained door that led into an even smaller hall where he only found an old, incredibly tall door. It made him feel like he was in a horror movie. When Tom touched the knob, he felt as if something amazing will happen to him.